every result you and I experience, every result that you can point to in your life, good, bad, or otherwise, is the result of the sum total of all of the conversations you've had, led, or overheard since before you were born.
Hey, empowered survivors. Welcome to the Let's Heal Show. I'm your host, Beth Jones, aka the Healing Mentor. My mission is to inspire and mentor other survivors of trauma and abuse as they walk their healing pathways. I'm here to help you become fiercely devoted to your healing, turning your pain into your power. That's why this show is all about healing. And through our guests, we will explore healing in action. Sometimes I'll share my journey. Other times we'll hear from fellow survivors about their transformational healing experiences, bringing purpose to their pain and shining light in the darkness of this world. We'll also have conversations with gifted healers and learn about various resources and tools from those who support us on our journeys. So, come on, everybody, let's heal. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Let's Heal Show. I'm so excited to have with me today George Kansas, who is someone new to me, although introduced through a mutual friend. But I think we're going to have a really amazing conversation today. So, George, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Beth. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my first recording of the year. So, Happy New Year. Would you take a few minutes to introduce yourself to the audience, please?
I'd be happy to. Yeah,
Thank
my name is George Peter Kansas. I'm an author and a speaker, single father, although my kids are now grown and have three grandchildren. I am a two-time cancer survivor, which is really not my first introduction to the healing world, but really is what took a 20, at the time, a 15 or 20-year career in personal development and inspirational speaking and leadership training and communications training, and sort of put me in a place where applying that to my own life after teaching thousands of people how to take care of themselves, and with a diagnosis of a rare leukemia 20 years ago. Now my wife Tracy and I work together to we teach conscious communications, leadership, and spiritual embodiment, and to purpose-driven, impact-driven entrepreneurs and leaders and couples who are up to big things, and helping people take those pesky, persistent patterns that show up in all of our lives because they were
you.
conditioned there, and turning them into pathways to purpose. And it all comes from the work that starts here and ends up coming out of me at some point on stage.
Yes. A lot to talk about there. So especially that inner work that comes out
Yeah.
of us and turns us into what we're doing today. So that's great. So congratulations on being a two-time survivor of cancer, beating it twice. That's amazing. You're healthy now?
Thank you. 100% healthy. Thank you. And
That's wonderful.
as I'm sure you've had the experience when you talk to survivors and who have found that, something happens when you recover from something that challenges your well-being, whether
Mm,
it's a trauma that's emotional or physical in nature, whether it's an illness, whether it's an accident of some kind. Oftentimes it shakes something loose, that something needs to change. And or even if you were completely unaware of the need to change, it feels like you want to change now. And for me, it wasn't so much like, oh my God, I have to live so differently. It was, however, a big shift in, for me, the value of two things: the value of every moment and the
yeah.
value of every word. And that's my work now, is to help people appreciate, you know, every result you and I experience, every result that you can point to in your life, good, bad, or otherwise, is the result of the sum total of all of the conversations you've had, led, or overheard since before you were born, since you were a
Mm,
tiny little, you know. And so that makes those words very powerful. Our words create worlds. I like to say that when we when you say something out loud that describes your experience or your physical health or a relationship or a situation, your body feels that.
Yeah.
And what your body feels, the universe hears.
Yeah, I agree with that. So the cancer diagnosis, going through that twice, the physical trauma that you would have gone through from all of that. Is that what set you on a healing journey, or were there other things or a pivotal moment when you looked at healing beyond the physical that you were dealing with at that time?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, when I was first diagnosed, I had been quite ill for several months. I was short of breath all the time. I was still very active. I had just created a charity. I had two businesses. I was speaking, I was coaching, I was
Goodness,
consulting. So I was raising two kids on my own,
really
full-time
busy.
single father, very busy, and just thinking, oh, I guess living like this is exhausting. You know, I was
Yeah.
I was producing records, I was producing concerts, I was promoting. It was crazy.
Oh
Like
my
I
goodness.
don't know how I stayed awake. And then toward the very right before I was hospitalized, I literally wasn't staying awake. I was falling asleep at the craziest times of day because I was
Mm,
exhausted. Come to
mm,
find out that after having a cardiac episode, going to the doctor to
mm.
have my blood tested to do a heart procedure, a catheterization, because they thought I had a blockage of some kind. They tested my blood to schedule a catheterization the following day. A couple hours later, the results came back that indicated that I had 20% functional blood in my body.
Oh,
20%. That when I so much so that when the doctor called, I literally had to get off the phone with the manager of Hootie and the Blowfish to take the phone to the doctor, and he said, "George, you've got 20% of the blood in your body, and I don't know how you're conscious right now." And I remember saying to
that's
him,
incredible.
well, what's that mean? He says, well, it means you need to get to a hospital right away. And I
Mm,
said, I remember saying to the doctor, well, we've got we were planning a big relief concert, Rock to Rebuild, to raise money for the tsunami. This was 20 years ago.
yeah.
And I said, well, we've got a big concert next Thursday or next Friday. Can I go? Can I get my blood tested after that?
You were told no.
And he said, George, I'll make a deal with you, and I'll never forget these words. If you're still alive next week after the concert, you can get your blood tested then.
Knew you were going to say something like that. That's
That
scary.
caught my
I
attention.
bet.
So that afternoon, I found myself in the bone marrow transplant unit of the hospital and the cancer center of the hospital in my then hometown, Albany, New York.
Hmm.
And they were taking samples from every part of my body, and I realized then that there was something serious. This was
Yeah.
serious.
Yeah.
And over the course of 5 days, the diagnoses were getting more accurate, dialing in.
Hmm. Hmm.
And over those 5 days, I was going to bed thinking that I might not wake up the next day.
Terrible.
And I was a meditator at the time, and a prayer has always been important to me, not in any specific vocabulary or doctrine or field.
Hmm.
Just connecting with source for me was always a part of my practice. And so I went into that meditation and asked, what's going on? I asked a specific question. First of all, I was putting the signs together. No blood, no immune system, signs in the hospital, literal signs, cancer center, bone marrow transplant unit,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the signs came together, and I thought, holy cow, somebody thinks I have cancer. Like the
But
thought never,
they hadn't told you that.
they didn't, because they weren't done with their tests.
They don't even tell you they suspect it. That's, mm,
It was crazy. And if they had, maybe I didn't hear it.
okay. Hmm.
So the first question I asked in meditation was, what could I have possibly done, thought, or felt to, for long enough to create an environment in my body so hospitable to this disease, if that's what's going on,
Mm.
without even without even a hesitation, an answer came to me. And I was very clear that some behavior that I had participated in my 20s, I didn't kill anybody or anything like that, but in my earlier years, I did things that I wasn't proud of.
Yeah.
It wasn't my best self putting forward, and I resented myself for it. I held it against myself, and that resentment crystal clear rang in my ears. Your life depends on you forgiving yourself.
The body keeps score.
Body keeps score, right? The issues are in your tissues.
Right?
Quite literally.
Yeah,
I mean,
literally.
yeah. Does that resonate?
Yeah, 100% it does. I mean, you've said a few things there that really resonate with me.
You
And
gotta
I
remember to take
wonder,
a
I mean,
breath.
because you talk, you talk about this very, very busy life that you had. And then suddenly, I'm assuming post-diagnosis, you were flipped to a place where you were not anywhere near that busy. You were focused on surviving, right? Literally
Yep.
surviving.
I mean, for
But
the first month, I couldn't leave the hospital.
I mean, that
Yeah.
busyness completely taken out of you. So I'm curious, and maybe you alluded to this a little bit in your 20s and what you were still carrying in your body and forgiveness of self, which is a huge part of the healing journey that we have to go through. But that busyness, I mean, I'm asking you this because it's my experience. That busyness that you had in your life, would you say now, looking back on it, that it was sort of created a distraction, flight, even perhaps fight, perhaps those modes of surviving from what you knew was there or other things that you had experienced?
It's a great question and a reasonable question. I mean, given everything we know about what humans do to avoid feeling,
Hmm.
that's in my
Yeah.
experience, that's what, there's something, a set of behaviors that we learn to protect ourselves from feeling things that just feel so big that, like, if I let myself feel that, it will crush me, you
Yeah.
know? And it's possible. Most of my reflections, I never really leaned out from life.
Hmm.
As a rule, I've always leaned in. Even I'm a deep feeler. I'm a deep empath in the human design. I'm a reflector. I don't know if that means anything to you or not, but
Yes.
for me, my power comes from my ability to feel.
Yeah.
When I'm channeling spirit on stage, or I'm writing, or I'm coaching with a client, I am aware that if I close myself off from anything, I limit my ability to help people. So I have to be open. My channel has to be open. My pipeline has to be open. And so I have learned over the years to allow myself to feel extraordinarily painful things in service of helping someone touch their own pain and access their own healing.
Hmm.
And so while I wasn't aware that that was actually what was going on, I have generally been pretty willing to feel things. However, there's a big however, in my desire to be available for my children as a sole custodial
Hmm.
father,
Mm-hmm.
in my desire to keep my act together, so to speak, I definitely compartmentalized certain aspects of my experience. The loss of my relationship with my children's mother, the loss of my mother, having she passed away from cancer 5 years before my diagnosis. I compartmentalized some of those emotions for the sake of, like, staying functional and being there for my children and being there for my clients and being there for growing my business and writing my books and all these things. And the resentment and not forgiving myself for those behaviors in my 20s is an example of
Yeah.
something that, had I given myself the opportunity to feel and allow the guilt, the resentment, the judgment that I directed towards myself, had I allowed myself to move that sooner, I do believe that I may have avoided that disease, you know.
That, and I'm going to come back to the reason why I asked the question about the busyness, but that what you're describing now about that self-inflicted carrying so much of that inside of you and contributing to what was happening in your body. It's equivalent of what I call the wretched abuser. And the
Mm.
worst, the absolute worst abuser that is out there is me and what I do to myself. The trauma and the abuse that I've inflicted on myself throughout my life is the absolute worst. And I understand I've done it because I was in survival mode because of what other people had done to me, hurting me and putting me in that place of being in survival. But that's why I call it the wretched abuser, because it's the absolute worst one that's there because it's completely self-inflicted.
And yes, absolutely. And it's a slippery slope or a tricky, it can be a tricky subject. I can tell you I've spoken to tens of thousands of cancer survivors and caregivers and patients since my recovery 20 years ago. And it can be tricky to stand in front of an audience and say, I'm clear that I participated in creating an
Sure,
environment in my
sure.
body hospitable to this disease without them saying, are you saying that I caused? That's not what I'm saying. Because you could so jump into more self-abuse saying, oh
Mm.
no, no, now I have
Yeah, I
to
did this to
take it's
myself. Yeah.
it's hard enough. Now I have to take on that I
Yeah.
created this person. No, that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that the the gift or one of the potential gifts in addition to perspective and a new lease on life, et cetera, one of the potential gifts of having these experiences is an opportunity to find that which is wanting to be healed inside of us. And and rather than take on like, well, don't tell me I'm responsible, my invitation is get help
Yeah.
for help.
Mine too.
Read Beth's
Yes.
book.
Yes.
Fine, read my
Yes.
book. Whatever,
Yes.
find whatever way works for
Yeah.
you that
Yeah.
allows you the safety. And this is why
Hmm.
the work my wife and I do feel is so sacred, is to create the environment that feels safe enough for you to open that cabinet up that has those scary feelings in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
A good therapist, a good coach, a good whatever is
Whatever.
available to you.
Yeah.
And and yeah, it's why it's so fulfilling and so sacred to hold space for people to experience that. I had to do that for myself. There wasn't anybody around who I learned that, working with shaman and working with healers and that work is just so precious to me now.
It's my same journey. So going through the healing process, ultimately, so I've lived that experience so I can share it with other people. And I think we're the same, it sounds like, in the view that I'm just here to help you figure out what works for you. I know what worked for me, but my formula is not your formula because you are unique. What you've experienced is unique. How you've survived is unique. So you need your own unique healing path. But I'm here to help you get on it and figure it out.
And I'm assuming, and I'm asking, I guess, and you went through different things to see what worked and what didn't,
Yes, exactly.
right?
And I'm still exploring because I get questions a lot about have you done X, Y, and Z? And yeah, I don't, some of those things I haven't done, but even as far as I am in my healing journey now, most of the stuff in the past is, I would say, probably as healed as it's going to be, although I think there's always room for improvement and I'm always going to be healing. Trying out new things, I suspect that there will be an element of healing, some part of what's not finished yet, right? There will be an opportunity to do that and become more of my best self.
And hopefully a lot of time to do it.
Yes, I think I do have a lot of time to do it. So a lot of experiences coming. So I just want to go back for just a minute to that when I asked you that question about being so busy, because what I know now, of course, when we come through our healing journeys and the experiences that we've both had, and then the age that we're getting to, you become a little wiser and you have more perspective on what your life has been, right? I can see that part of a lot of what I was doing was creating an extremely busy and chaotic life. And in fact, when I talk about the unhealthy survivorship and the ways that I lived my life that weren't great. And I've, probably had some of those same experiences that you've had when you were younger that I'm not too proud to talk about. So I've had some of those. But when I look at probably the one of the worst things that I did to myself, and maybe this is sort of indirectly what you were saying as well in terms of how it manifested in your body, but living in that very, very chaotic environment for me. So my work professionally, my work was super busy, super chaotic. I was traveling all over the world. I was, I did white collar crime and fraud investigations. And these were, companies that were answering to, various U.S. agencies that have the letters, DOJ and the SEC and the Department of Commerce. I mean, they were serious matters that companies were dealing with. And of course, you've got stockholders that cared about what was happening in these companies. They wanted the answers yesterday for, your today trying to figure it out, and they wanted to know yesterday. And so there's a lot of pressure that came with that, long hours and working days on end. So that resonates with me, what you're talking about, that very busy professional life. On top of that, I would go home and my personal life was equally chaotic and busy because my ex-husband and I had ranch property for the vast majority of the years that we were married, ranch property with way too many animals. There was always something that needed care, and it was just the two of us trying to take care of all of that. So I would have this super busy day, long day at work, and then I would go home and have this super busy, long evening. And literally from the moment that I woke up until the time that I laid my head down to go to sleep at night, I was just on fast pace go, constant. And what I found is that just distracted me from everything. It was just this greatest distraction. And I didn't, and I had become, I'd become emotionless, talking about your emotions. I had become emotionless when I was 5. It was the first time I was sexually abused. And that, I can go back and look at pictures of me, picture taken a few months after that. Yes, already I was emotionless. And so that chaos, that busyness was feeding that distraction from my emotions, and I just stuck them in a wall, this massive wall that I built around me for 45 years that was huge, and I was trapped behind it when it came time for me to heal. And so it's just interesting. I resonate with that. You're talking about that busyness, and then something, gets your attention. You're like, oh, I'm a very different circumstances. I had a hypnotherapy event, which is what woke me
That's what
up
I was
to
going to ask you.
I met this wall when I came to back into conscious awareness after the hypnotherapy event. I ran into the inside of that wall and I was like, oh, I woke up, I have no idea who I am. And there's this wall around me. And then I had to, go through a process of pulling that down and shedding masks and becoming who I actually am.
That's why, well, it's beautiful, as difficult as it may be sometimes to find that there's a wall or whatever a person's experience is. And that's why this work is so important.
Mm,
And there's so many ways to go about it. There's hypnotherapy, there's therapy, there's work with psychedelics, there's coaching, there's all sorts of
mhm.
pathways that I feel honored to have explored so
Me
deeply
too.
all of those
Yeah.
aspects. I'm trained
Yeah.
as a hypnotherapist. I'm trained as
Are
a
you?
medicine holder. I do
Uh,
NLP. I got every certification you could have. I probably have. I don't even count. I never paid my path was as a coach right out of the gate before there was even a career called coach. I was doing it alongside. I had my law practice, I had my consulting business, and we couldn't advertise both at the same time. So I was always doing my corporate speaking was always geared toward coaching clients and coaching teams and supporting them. This was before the industry. This was in 1988, 89. There wasn't an industry, a
yeah.
coaching industry back then.
Yeah.
And so I always sort of I think certifications are great. We have one we're developing ourselves. I'm a big fan. But for me, it was like, I'm not certified. I'm doing it. I'm doing it in the field. But why I'm sharing that is that to explore my personal mission was to leave no stone unturned.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, people are doing this work with psychedelics to experience, to learn about how the brain works in connection to our heart, yeah, sign me up. I'm interested in that.
Me
And
too.
shaman and done a lot
Yeah.
of work in that area, and so grateful that because now if I hold that space for someone, they know and I know. Look, I've been there 1,000 times in on my own 2 feet. I
Yeah.
got you. Maybe not 1,000 times, just to be clear. But you know, my point is that whatever way we access that remembering, that there was a time when someone or something outside of me imprinted me with such a powerful experience as to alter literally
Yeah.
my psychic development, my
Yes.
the development of my consciousness. And of course, it's such a tragedy when it happens to a child
Mhm.
because you go decades without realizing
Literally.
yeah, we call we call this exploration who's got the mic in our work. Our trademark is who's got
Hmm.
the mic. It means when you're responding to something in your life, chaos, for instance, or some startling, who's responding? Is it your adult self or is it that precious little one who froze because
Yes.
it was a survival mechanism,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
And our work is to reintroduce you to. How can you not love that version of you? She's such a precious, beautiful
Precious.
little
She is
and
precious.
and her outburst as an adult is her trying to survive. Tracy,
Yes.
my wife, calls it love looking for love. That's all it
Yes.
is.
Oh,
And
well, I
so
could talk about that forever.
all day, right?
The love part of it. Yeah. So the word heal for me is an acronym which means to hope, evolve, and love.
Mm,
HEAL, hope, evolve, and
that's
love. And
beautiful.
there's a reason
Hope,
why
evolve,
love
and
is on the end of it, right? Because I mean, ultimately, everything that I've been through is about trying to understand what love truly is, how to give it, and how to receive it across a wide variety of relationships. But that is great. Love looking for love. And that is so that is so me. And I've been on an amazing journey exploring love, which is has been a long one and it's been spiritually, divinely led. But I love that. Love looking for
yeah.
love.
Well, I love that you say divinely led too, because I mean, personally, that exploration without understanding or at least maintaining this connection to source, whatever that means, it's not a religious statement, you know? I mean, we've coached people of every doctrine, every dogma. There, there's no right or wrong.
I
At the
agree.
same time, that relationship, and it is a unique relationship, each one of us have a
One
unique
of us.
relationship to that.
Yes.
And regardless of the vocabulary we choose to describe that relationship, it almost feels like to explore an emotional experience without trying to understand its relationship to a spiritual
Yeah.
experience feels like you're just not giving yourself every opportunity to win.
I think that's right. It's a
Yeah.
disconnect. It
It's a
is.
disconnect.
I completely agree. And part of my exploration, I've had some very profound lessons about self-love and spiritual love because when I began my journey exploring love, naturally it begins for me, it began with the romantic or fully intimate relationship, which I think is natural for a lot of people. And I got knocked around pretty heavily in the beginning of that is not where you start, right? And I had some very profound and painful experiences around self-love first. And then I had this, it was like God was like, kind of like, okay, you got the self-love part, but do you remember that source is here, the universe is here, there's a much higher power that's here that really loves you. And so I've had some amazing experiences being reminded
Yeah,
about that I mean, I've some of them are in my book, I've written about them on a blog and will continue to write about them because they're
good
super
for you.
powerful. But I believe, I'm the same way you are, and I think perhaps more and more of us, and I hope there are going to be more people like you and me that are out there talking about our experiences that don't tie spirituality to any particular form. Right. And that's me. And I love when you said that about you use the words, meditating and prayer and connection to source. So that's how I describe it to people. When I pray, I'm giving to source or God or however you want to refer to it. When I'm meditating, for me, I'm receiving. I'm being quiet and still and listening to what is it that you have to say to me. And I say the same thing. It's my direct connection to source. It's actually one of my intentions for 2025. When I did my intention setting for this year, is I really want to enhance my direct connection to source because I get messaging all different ways. I have apps on my phone that pop up and they're talking to me and giving me messages, or my Reiki master, sometimes through trauma therapy. I mean, they come to me in all different ways, but I really, really am going to be intentional this year about that direct connection and taking all that out and really enhancing that in me. So when you
Yeah.
said that about meditating and prayer and source, I was like, we are similar, very
Well,
similar.
yeah, I can't remember if it was I it might have been Osho or one of those incredibly talented teachers, as you said, something about prayer is when you're talking to God and meditation is when you listen for the answer
Yes,
or something
exactly.
along those
That's
lines.
exactly how I describe it. Giving. Here's what I need to ask you about, and talk to me, please. Let me know what I need to know about this. Yeah.
And for the longest time, you know, human beings are we're interesting creatures. We
Yeah.
have like there may be a span of 1,000 years where a particular vocabulary is super powerful and super influential, and then there might be a rebound. You know, I came up in the 80s as I was raised as a Catholic, and then in the late 80s and 90s and et cetera, in the 1990s, it was sort of stylish to be call yourself a recovering Catholic. And my spiritual journey really began around that time where I was exploring and just fascinated by the thousands of ways we experience this oneness,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
No matter what we call it. And what I've found is that because I've traveled down all of those alleyways, I can hold conversations. You can come to me
Me too.
with any you name it. I have had a spiritual conversation with someone in that
Yes.
faith and
Yes.
felt absolutely connected with them, and they felt absolutely heard and held
Yes.
and not judged, and even like the staunchest believer of a particular
Yes.
thing, by the time we're done, it's like, yeah, I get why you're so passionate about that. I get why you believe in that so much. And it's okay. You keep
Okay.
going, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And yeah, there's all day long. We could talk about this all day
We
long. So
could. So I was baptized Baptist in Singapore. So I grew up in the Middle East and Southeast Asia. And then I would say less than a year after I was baptized, which Singapore I would say is probably, mixed religion, because Singapore is sort of a melting pot. And so, I mean, you do
uh-huh.
have, I mean, it's sort of mixed in terms of, that's probably a good way to say it, a melting pot of religions in Singapore,
Yeah,
like other cultures. But
diversity.
then my parents moved us to Indonesia, which is one of the most populous Muslim countries in
Yeah.
the world. And I had a rough time with some of the things that I was being asked to believe when that happened to me. And that's really what started my own questioning and my own spiritual journey, and then really wanting to really just understand what it means to me, right? Which is, that's the important part, is the unique aspects of our spirituality for each one of us.
Well, that's I think there's a point at which a healthy seeker, a healthy adult with a consciousness and sovereignty is saying to themselves, I know this is what I've been taught. I know this is what I've been taught. I know this is what I've been conditioned and how I've been conditioned to see the world. At some point, it's healthy for me to say, what do I choose to believe now? And what am I just going to go along with? And it can it I have seen it causes disruption in a lot of people's lives to
Yeah.
say, wait, mom and dad, I know you're really passionate about this, but I don't it doesn't make sense to me anymore. I've seen too much harm come from that belief,
Mm.
or
Hmm.
I've seen too much
Hmm.
disconnection, or I've felt isolated, fearful,
Yes.
judged, separate from source because of that belief. So I'm gonna separate myself, or I'm gonna disavow that belief and take on a new one. And sometimes people say, well, if you're gonna do that, I'm not gonna talk to you anymore.
Yeah.
So you have
which is too
choices to
bad.
make, right?
Yeah. Yes. And it's too bad that it is that way sometimes. Because I find if you go across religions in particular, when you get down to the fundamental beliefs that are really there in all of them, they all come back to love.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Love looking for love, love looking for a place to put love, right? That's what they all come back to.
Absolutely. And you know, this idea around the explorations and the wisdom traditions of the Aboriginal wisdom traditions that are really connected to the earth
Mm,
and the medicine work. And when you really go deep into those explorations, one of the common themes is always that. It's like you are connected to everything.
yes.
And it's important that you accept that because when you do, one, you won't hurt the earth as much. Two, you'll be kinder to each other.
Mhm.
Three, you'll actually look out for each other
Yes.
because that person's pain is your pain, right?
Yes.
There's so many things that are natural outcomes.
Mm,
If you if you actually consider the natural world as an example, I was trained as a biologist in college. I was a natural history major as well as entrepreneurship, but my biology training taught me how the human body works, which has been
mm.
infinitely helpful in my
Of
own
course.
healing, but
Oh,
also,
yes. Of course.
and that when you recognize that every part of your body is connected to every other part. I have a meditation. I don't know if I've shared this with you. We call it the thank you body meditation.
Mm.
And it's basically, I'm so very grateful that every cell, every tissue, every organ, and every system functions in perfect synchronicity
Oh, I
in
love that.
every moment of every day with ease and with grace and peace and abundance without a conscious thought given it.
Oh, I
Thank
love
you,
that.
Beth. And it's so simple an idea
Mm.
that, a cell at the tip of my finger is communicating somehow to my liver and my kidneys and my, et cetera. Like, wait a second, hold the presses. When a mother nursing a child, the moment that child's lips touches her nipple, the child's saliva conveys neurotransmitters that the mother's breast interprets and automatically concocts a mixture
Yeah.
suited perfectly for what the child needs at that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. It is mind blowing.
So I say that's not biological,
Mhm.
that's biomagical.
Yes, it is.
Like,
I agree with you.
so
I
during
agree.
COVID, I taught a course, biomagical, and it just blows me away. And when we appreciate that, and then
Hmm.
we look at the macrocosm of the natural world,
Hmm.
it's the same way.
Yes.
Life is one organism. My well-being and your well-being are infinitely, intimately, and inextricably intertwined.
Yes.
And
I
when we
agree with you.
realize that, we let people in front of us in traffic. We say hi to someone in the grocery store.
Yeah.
We actually care when someone is in pain
Yes.
or in
Yes.
fear. And
Yes.
we don't put bumper stickers that say F your feelings. Or we don't, you know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying.
And it's
Yes.
not it's not rainbows and
Yeah.
unicorns. It's
No.
interdependence. It's
Yeah.
kindness, not niceness. You know what I
It's
mean?
kindness. It is kindness. Kindness, but also raising the vibrational frequency of all of us to where we're in emotions that are love-based emotions as opposed to fear-based emotions. Right?
You
And that's,
raising the vibrational frequency,
yes, of
everything
the collective. Yeah.
and it's possible one person can make a difference.
I'm a living testament to that. So are you. One person can make a difference. So I'm curious about your spiritual journey and like people who are close to you that have different spiritual journeys, right? And so when I'm asking you this question, I'm thinking about two very dear friends of mine, one who is staunchly Catholic, who I've known for many, many years, and another who I've known for a good number of years as well, she says Christian, but I think she's probably Presbyterian or Methodist, So they me on the oddities of my spirituality. So, when I do things like tell them about you connecting me with Vishak, the Hindu Vedic astrologer, and then I had a reading like almost immediately around astrocartography because I want to know where to live in this world, right?
Don't
Yay!
you love
And they
him?
look at me, they're like, I don't even know the words that just came out of your mouth, but they're like, so they'll kind of go with me and just kind of humor me in these kind of things, because I will talk about what I draw from religion, the concept of love and a higher power. That's also universal across religion, right? Deities and higher powers and praying, meditation, all of that, right? So I will talk about those things. And I use the term God interchangeably with universe or source all the time, right? But there's this confusion that they go through. And then I'll have an experience like recently I've been to church the last 2 Sundays, two services on those 2 Sundays, and they're like, thank goodness she's back in church. Her soul is going to be saved. And it's a joke. We laugh about it, but I just wonder if you have experiences similar to that where people are confused and they're praying for you and whatever it is that they think they need to pray for you for. It's funny to me.
Well, you know what's really beautiful? At the heart of that is deep love for you.
It is. Absolutely.
It might sound like judgment sometimes.
No,
It
it's
might
funny. We
sound
laugh about it.
superior sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And when, the invitation is like, if they say, "Oh, I'm praying for you," say, "Oh, let's do now. Let's do that now."
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Not to
Yes.
put them on the spot, but actually
Oh
to like,
no.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yes,
Do it
I'm
right
so
now.
grateful.
That's a
I know
great suggestion.
I know that when I've been in the hospital, I know people wrote to me, I know people prayed for me. I was
Yes.
so grateful that someone
Yeah.
held me in that intention with me.
Mm.
And so it's such a great question because again, it's our conditioning. I tell people who feel like I need to do personal development work because I'm broken. I say, you're not broken. Do the work for sure, but not because you're broken. You're not broken. You're conditioned. You're
Mm.
conditioned to see the world a particular way. You're conditioned to see your place in the world a particular way. You're conditioned to see your place relative to the infinite in a particular way.
Mm.
And if you're willing to peek through some of that conditioning, if you're brave enough, right,
No.
to look through all those decades of you should this and you should that, if you're willing to look through that,
Yes.
you might surprise yourself,
I
you
think so.
know?
I totally agree with you.
Totally. And so this invitation, oh, you should do this, you should that, or God, or that's not God, or that's not Jesus, or whatever. I welcome the inquiry and I say,
Mhm.
yeah, sure, I'll take that on. That I use the word universe because if I say God, I might miss somebody. But I
Yeah.
also use the word God. And if I miss somebody, if I use the word God, I also use the word universe. Not because I think one is right or one is wrong. Personally, I think it doesn't matter. If there's an omnipotent, omniscient, all-knowing, all everywhere God,
All loving.
all loving God, then he,
Yeah.
she, they, or it does not care what I call he, her, they, or it. And
100%.
and and so, and by the way, I don't care if you're the Pope or the high imam, or I don't care who you are. You can't tell me with any more certainty than I can that this is so or that is so,
Mm.
because we're all human having this amazing human experience. I like to say we're spiritual beings enjoying
Yes.
life as human beings
Yeah.
for the time being,
Yes.
and that at some point we'll be elsewhere, elsewise, else what, you know? And so, as long as that is true, I'm willing to admit that I may be using the wrong vocabulary if you're willing to admit you might be too.
Yes. Yes. I think the work that I do, I know for sure, and it sounds like the work that you do, spirituality is huge in healing, right? You know that, I know
I
that.
believe so.
And I think for me, what's happened is the universe has led me down a path to where I am broadly inclusive of everyone's way of believing. And that's for that purpose of being able to connect with them. One of the things I experienced in my professional career for years is, I'm an accountant. And so a lot of what I was dealing with was various accounting issues that were occurring and a lot of compliance and ethics programs. And each organization has their own lingo for certain aspects of those things, right? And
Right.
so I was always like day one, the mission of day one when you're working with a company is to learn their lingo so that I can communicate with them. And that was part of my job, and my team's job was to get to connect with them where they are. And that meant figuring out what are their words for X, Y, and Z and adopting those in the way that we talk to them. And it's exactly the same thing. I find myself doing that now with respect to this spirituality, right? Is that I'm able to meet you where you are and understand what you're saying in a very inclusive way because, and I'm going to say this quietly to you and shh, I don't care how you say it. It's all the same, right? So let me just meet you where you are so I can connect with you, right?
It's yes, and it's no
Mm,
different. I'm a professional speaker. I've been speaking on stages to corporate audiences since I was in college in the
mm,
80s. And it's no different than me. I always used to go in to a place, let's say it's a company or an organization's headquarters, wherever, or a retreat, and I would ask about the local, what's going on in the local,
mhm.
what's the high school called? What's the high school's mascot, and what's the buzz around town these days, so that I would drop that in as a reference in my talk so that they would know that I exerted some effort to get to know them instead of me just coming in with my canned speech and delivering this
Yeah,
message.
yeah.
And it always, without exception, they appreciated it. They
Yes.
appreciated that I said, "Go Hawks." And they were like, "What? How do you know about the Hawks?" Because as a speaker, I know that there is space that separates us. And if I allow that space to separate us energetically, I haven't done my job with that audience. And
Mhm,
my job is to create rapport because
mm.
I know I've walked into those rooms sometimes and they're standing there like this, like, you can't teach me anything.
Yes.
Great. I don't want to teach you anything. I want to have a conversation with you,
Yes. Yeah.
and they'll leave having learned something. I guarantee it.
Yes.
And you know that doing that, in my view, is no different than of finding a way to establish rapport. I have facilitated probably 120 weddings in my life. I've
Oh my
officiated weddings,
goodness.
and I love it. I love it because every audience is different. Every audience, every family has their own story. And I remember one time performing a wedding with a couple, and I had written the ceremony for them, and they told me, "We got to be careful because I really don't want to mention Jesus or God, but my grandmother is the church lady, you know? And so how do we do that?" And I say, "Leave it with me." And by the end of the ceremony, without ever once, and again, no disrespect to Jesus or God or any path, without ever once making reference to that wisdom tradition, we delivered the ceremony. And afterwards, the grandmother, the church lady, came up to me and said, "I have never felt a wedding so profoundly, so deeply in my heart." And she went on to explain how she was certain that Jesus was blessing me and all this. And I was like, "Amen. I'll take that all
Absolutely.
day long, you
Yes.
know?
Yes.
And my point being that the effort to we're all spiritual beings having
Yes. I
a
love that.
human experience as human beings for the
For
time
the
being.
time being.
When we make an effort to connect, it's love looking for love. That's why
Yeah.
they say every obnoxious act is a cry for help. It's like, I see you, I want to connect with you, I'm willing to find the love in me that can connect with the love in you. However this goes, we're going to make the effort to do it. I think at the end of the day, that's what's going to heal this planet.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. Love. It's all about love. Now, what I didn't realize is that you are a hypnotherapist.
Well, I'm trained as a hypnotherapist. I
Or
don't,
you're trained as a hypnotherapist.
yeah.
You don't practice. So have you actually done hypnotherapy sessions?
Well, I use because so I didn't graduate from any program. I worked
Hmm.
with a hypnotherapist and
Hmm.
to learn the skill sets and induction and the practice of that. And I use those skills when I lead meditation. It's all by consent,
Okay,
of
that
course.
makes
And
sense.
when I lead a meditation, whether it's for an athlete, whether it's for a golfer or a sharpshooter or a football player, or a leader or someone trying to find their voice, whatever it is, excuse me, I use those skills to create an experience that is effective. So
Hmm.
if someone has a desire to, we just had this beautiful conversation today with a group of clients around attachment to attachment, like being attached to the idea that I could make a decision that is the wrong decision, and
Hmm.
that I might miss the right decision by making this wrong decision. And I said, one of the biggest challenges with that approach is that it relies so heavily on the existence, on the idea that there is such a thing as a mistake,
Hmm.
that you're putting all your eggs in the basket of there is a right way and a wrong way, and that takes you out of the moment. That has you either worried about the future or resentful of the past. Either way,
Hmm.
you're not in the present moment
Right.
where all the opportunity exists,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so we explored this idea of right and wrong, that there's a not that there isn't right and wrong, like how to treat people and things, but this attachment to, oh, I could make the wrong decision, actually is a decision in and of itself.
Yes, it is.
You're deciding not to do that thing, and you're saying to the universe, I don't trust you. I don't trust that I'm going to learn something no matter which way I go.
Love that. I love that.
You know? So, so let me try to bring it back to the question you asked about.
So we were talking about, I asked you about the hypnotherapy.
Yeah.
I was
Thank
curious.
you. Thank you. Thank you. So this idea of, hey, we're going to go through and I'm going to make suggestions to your subconscious as we go through so that when you come out of this meditation, you will have the experience of not feeling quite so attached to that idea, or feeling clear on the thing you said you want to be clear about, or whatever the intention of the meditation. And it's always something that we decide together. And
Mm.
it's always something done with consent. It's absolutely critical. And I think I can say this, we always record it so they have it.
Oh,
Like they
yeah.
can go back and listen to
Oh,
it and say, "Well, you didn't. I don't have to act like a chicken in the grocery store, right, George? You're not going to make me do things that I don't want to do." Say, "No, you're going to have this. You're going to know that that's not the
oh
case."
my goodness. So I'm looking at you like I'm looking at you. So by the way, if you're just listening to this, you're not seeing the video feed of this. My eyes are bulging out of my head right now when you're talking about recording. And this is the reason why. So because the hypnotherapy session that I had was sort of my life altering event, my life quake moment. The person who walked in, I think I've said this already, the person who walked in died. And I walked out, me walked out of that room. But it was
Right.
deeply profound, but it was also probably the most terrifying single event I've ever had in my life. So to have a recording at the moment, I was like, I do not want to hear that. I would not want to
No.
hear it again. But
Yeah.
now
Well,
I'm like,
that's your
that
choice.
actually, but that actually might be, because I remember it the way that I remember it, and so I, I don't know what I want to like listen to it and know did I get that right or not. I mean, I listen to my astrology readings. I interpret those the way I do when I hear them, and then I go listen to them 2 weeks later because I want to hear something probably in a different way, right? For example, or I've advanced in the time period they're talking about. That I'm not sure
Well,
because
you
say
said
it was
you
terrifying.
sure, and that's legit. Like you don't. I mean, you. This is the thing. You said I maybe I could go back to listen to see if I got it right or not. That's my point. Like you might never, and I think probably most people don't go back and listen to the recordings, unless it's a kind of thing where we've agreed we're going to lay this down and then
Yeah.
you're going to go back and you're going to repeat this on purpose to keep
Mm.
getting into a state like getting ready for a speech or getting ready for some kind of life event. In your case, where you had the transformation, you had the transformation. You
Yeah.
experienced the effect. You did it right already. There's no
Yes.
need,
Yes.
you had
Yes.
the experience.
Yeah,
So,
I did.
so in
Yeah.
that case, that, and how we interact with our subconscious is is so fascinating. There's no right or wrong way, and there's also different to what end, I like to ask. In this case, you had a profound shift
Mm.
in how you know yourself. Mission accomplished.
Yes.
Now your task is, what will this new self do in the world? How will this new self see the world? How will this new self interact with your self-image in the
Yeah.
world and all
Yeah.
that? And that's awesome. Like, yay, mission accomplished. And then there are other people, like I've worked with sharpshooters who want to increase the reliability of a certain level of performance. That could be a repeating thing
Mm.
until it's not. Like, I have this practice, I go through
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
routine, I
Hmm.
get this meditation, I get focused, I go perform. And so the why is important. What you're seeking to accomplish really makes a difference.
We could have a whole conversation just about my hypnotherapy experience because even that, what you just said, the why of what you were seeking to accomplish, I literally had no idea what was going to happen. And I had zero awareness of what was coming. And I thought I was going in because I was having trouble building deep relationships with people. And of course, now what I've told you about where I started being emotionless, right? And now,
What
actually,
about
interestingly
you?
enough, about that, I laugh because I'll start writing my second book this year, and it's about mastering relationships. And I began in a place of not being able to engage in relationships at all. And somebody suggested me, "Well, go have this hypnotherapy," and I was like, "Okay, no big deal. I've done so much therapy." Completely unaware of what was going to happen to me.
That's awesome. Well, see, that's a perfect example. You were thinking, you were thinking that it was about the relationships that you couldn't have outside of yourself.
Hmm.
And what you saw by finding that wall was that you had actually blocked your access to your
Yes.
own self, right?
Yes. Yes.
So, so the magic of that is, I mean, now this Beth that leaves this office at post hypnosis, what's possible for her? Like, it's not even about the old Beth anymore,
Right.
right?
Yes.
So the beauty of that, it's
It
just so perfect.
is.
You
It is.
know, what you brought up in me, what bubbled up was this idea of, I had a personal experience with ayahuasca, and I've worked with an ayahuasca a handful of times. I felt called to sit
Mm.
with the medicine. And that's what I've heard, and from talking to many other people, that's sort of what happens with that particular medicine. If you don't, for those of folks who aren't familiar, it's a tea brewed with vines that grow in the Amazon, and they brew this tea, and you sip this tea, and it stimulates the release of DMT in your nervous system, and it can be psychoactive, and it can be purgative, makes you
Yeah.
vomit. It
Yeah.
sometimes you don't have any of those experiences. But my experience was, I was called to the medicine. I didn't know what to expect, and the medicine had an agenda with me, you know. And this idea, is this okay that we're talking about this? Yeah,
Absolutely.
okay,
It
good.
is. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And the idea is, I went in, like you said, you went into the hypnosis. I didn't know what to expect. I had this experience. The ayahuasca for me was a very similar experience in that I didn't have an agenda. I was open. And I would say that generally any medicine experience that I've undertaken, I might have gone in with the intention, show me spirit, whatever it is that I need to
Mm.
see that I'm not seeing, but I didn't have any set of expectations about, should I get apartment A or apartment B? I never
Yeah.
asked a question like that specific.
Or
Yeah,
even it sounds like even like awareness of a specific aspect of your life that you're healing, like help me advance or to deal with this, which
for
I can
sure.
myself,
For
right?
sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, because, and if there's a blind spot, show me the blind spot. And if
Yes.
there's a,
Yes.
and and being open to a surprise, being open to, we always like to add and make it gentle enough that I can handle it. Don't terrify me if you can avoid it, unless that's the medicine
Not get
today,
that. I did not get that, but oh, I forgot that part.
Yeah, right, next time. But but whatever terrified you was also somehow part of the medicine,
Oh,
right?
100%. Yes,
100%. You have
absolutely.
no doubt
Absolutely.
about that
Oh,
now, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. And for me, so it was, it was about my grandfather, who was the person who first abused me when I was a young child. And I've gone through now, since then, I've gone through various iterations, which I call the 5 chapters of healing my relationship with him, which have all, because he died in 1994 and I've done all this since 2020. And so it's all been spiritual, right? I do a lot of visualization around it, but it's soul level and spirit level is where I've done that. And actually, with what you just said, if I think about it, there's actually probably 6 chapters, because that was the chapter that said, where the universe was like, okay, it's time for you to deal with this. You need to know, it needs to all come together in your mind, all the stuff that's in your subconscious or disconnected in your brain. We're going to put it all together for you. It was terrifying. We're going to put it all together for you in a very clear way. And I'm talking to you about this, and like it moves on and on and on, because I could say even now 7 chapters, because I had a nightmare for 15 years about a house that was central to my hypnotherapy session. And that house, he had lived in that house and I had been in that house, right? So I mean, and that was just a nightmare I'm carrying for 15 years. So all that, yeah, you're right. It's the brain, just what happens in those sessions. It's amazing if you're open and you let it flow.
Well, and you learn what you learn until you learn
Learn.
it. And you
Yeah.
learn, you learn what you learn when you need to learn it. I believe that with
Yeah,
the
100%.
whole entirety
100%.
of me.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and this trauma is a particular path. Like we all have disruptions in our timeline. We all
Mm,
have tragedies and things that we deal with. And trauma, particularly childhood sexual trauma, has its own set of rules in a way, as far as how to walk through them, how to hold them, how to regard them. I have such a particular respect for you and people like you who are recovering and doing the work to explore childhood sexual trauma.
mm,
It's so common that the
mm.
perpetrator isn't someone you can interact with anymore.
Yeah.
It's a common theme, because these memories are repressed for so long.
Yeah.
And there's a precious little, I'm feeling emotion as I'm saying this. There's a precious little version of you that gets to learn painfully and inconveniently and with difficulty, gets to learn to be her own protector, right?
Oh, you 100%. Yes.
And which means you get to be your own protector, which you
Mhm.
get to go back with
Yeah.
so much compassion and patience and love for that precious little girl in your
Working on
kid.
that for a while.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
beautiful.
It's been an amazing experience. Painful. I tell people my healing journey has been the most painful thing I've ever been through in my life, but it's also absolutely exquisite. I've had some of the most profound and amazing experiences as I've gone through that. And it's been amazing. So
Well, can I share a piece
yes,
that
absolutely.
is coming through me so clearly, that this layer of this connection to the divine.
Hmm.
In some ways, this child version of you, her connection to the divine was pure, unadulterated, right?
Hmm.
In other ways, her ability to comprehend wasn't as nuanced as yours is as an adult,
That's right.
with the wisdom of experience and reflection and exploration. And so there's a certain beauty to, like, I'm going to lean in, I'm going to feel this pain, because goodness knows you can't look at those experiences and not feel the pain. That's why
Hmm.
it's so difficult, right?
Hmm.
But if I look at this and lean into this experience, then I may have the opportunity to hold this former version of me in relationship with the divine that only I can understand now because of the experiences and the explorations and the inquisitions that I've undergone. Does that make sense? Like,
Absolutely. It does.
and that's
Yes.
such a precious, beautiful opportunity. It's like, oh, you think I've got you now? Wait till I introduce you to this one,
Yes.
right? Like, come
Yes.
on.
Yes.
We have an expression, we're just getting started.
Yes.
You know, we're just getting started, and look how far we've come.
Yes. Yes.
Like, way to
Yeah.
go.
A long, long way. That's beautiful. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed this, and I could talk to you for another hour easily. I
Totally.
could. And maybe we'll
Uh-oh,
do it
she's
again
saying, I've
sometime.
enjoyed this. That means we're almost done.
We are. We are. We have. We've been talking for over an hour already.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah. We have been. Right. It goes by fast. So kind of like the way this first half of January's gone by.
Right.
So quickly. So, yeah, I've enjoyed this immensely. But before we go, I would like to ask you to tell the audience where they can find you because you've given so much wonderful wisdom today, and I'm going to seek you out some more. And I'm sure that there will be listeners who will seeking you out as well. So, where is that?
Well, thank you, Beth. There's so many different ways to find us on the web, and I'd like to invite the thank you body meditation is so precious to me. It's like something I'd love to share with everybody and feel free to share it with everyone. And it's downloadable at
Okay.
thankyouBody.love.
Oh,
It's so
of
easy. And
course.
just just use it and share it and just that would be a gift to me and my gift to you, and it would be really wonderful.
That's amazing, George. Thank you so much. And I'm going to download it and I will make sure that a link is included on all the platforms that this comes out on. So thank you so much for that. Yeah,
Thank
I've really enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure there are more to come. I'll see you again soon, I hope, sometime. So yes, thank you so much. It's been
thank you,
wonderful.
Beth.
All right, everybody, that concludes our conversation today with George Canvas on the Let's Heal show. Come on, everybody, let's heal.